Thanks so much for having me. My video there tonight. I start, of course, by acknowledging that I'm reading to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. Sovereignty has never been ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And that fact is central to my writing and my work, and the way I live my life on this land. Thanks so much, Overland and Evelyn, for asking me to contribute this piece, and yeah, it was a real honour and delight. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the piece called Bodies, Lives, Intertwined. So Jewish bodies are not simple things. Early Zionists actively wanted to reform the Jewish body to make it hard and fast and strong and lean, not rounded, soft, gentle, tender. To make it heterosexual, masculine, aggressive. In this vision, Jewish bodies were meant to take up space through strength and exertion, but to be neatly contained in how they were built. These ideas continue. They remain in how Zionism is lived in the everyday, with a conscription army inside the state of Israel, and the mass use of security guards and the paraphernalia of security culture among Jewish Zionist communities in Australia. We see it every day. We see it too in Zionist youth movements and in the social demands on Jews to marry other Jews and have Jewish babies. When I was in Palestine in 2007, doing research on cultures of Holocaust memory, which is a trip I wouldn't do now because of BDS, but I stayed with a high school friend who had moved to Israel. It was scorching hot, and I was sweaty and hairy and unkempt, while she was lean with short, straight hair, everything in its place, no sign of sweat ever. It was stark and fascinating. Lily Brett's depiction of bodies, sex, food, neuroses, relationships and Holocaust memory was published in 1988, the year of the bicentenary of Australia. And so it, in some ways, sits as part of that moment in time. Or maybe to put it better, I want to think about it in terms of that moment. Invited into the vast archives of Overland's past, I went straight to the 1988 editions to think in some ways about nation building, about how Overland might have been thinking about this moment in its time. I love that this piece might be part of that time, not because the nation should be built, it shouldn't, Australia must end, but because this is something other, and I want stories like this that tell of a location in place, but which do not try to build the nation in my collective past. There is an invitation there to reflect on past relationships I've been in, with the non-Jews and the Jews, the textures of the bodies and the love that has flown between us, the passions and the hurt, the ambiguities and the incredible neuroses. Garth's new trousers had 3 pleats on either side of the zip. Until now, he had worn skin-tight, peg-legged Levi's. Miriam looked at Garth. She found the loose space between his legs alluring. She started to think about what lay behind those parallel pleats. I went for a walk along Merry Creek during the long lockdown in 2021, shortly after my boyfriend and I had broken up, with a friend who has 3 kids, 2 cats and a husband. And she told me how she constantly had someone touching her. I spoke of how I never got to touch or be touched by another person. I now tell this story sometimes as a funny moment to illustrate the vastly different experiences of lockdown. I don't know that it really is funny, but I know skin hungers. Garth stood next to Miriam. He wound his leg around her leg and stroked her face. All 3 children were at school. They lay down and had a noisy fuck. After she came, Miriam wept and wept. She often cried after a strong orgasm. She knew that it usually meant that she'd been shutting herself off from any intense emotions, been out of touch with her sadness. Shortly after my breakup, I got a pair of shoes fixed by the cobbler on Nicholson Street. I waited while she polished my shoes, and there was something in the care with which she buffed the rounded heels that made me burst into tears. I was being looked after by hands that take care and want the best. She was kind. We joked together about the awkward emotions of breakups. The whole body can be taken over by these moments. They are not solely of the mind and the heart, but my stomach, with its very Jewish IBS curses, felt these emotions deeply. There were so many levels and layers to the strangeness of those times. My Jewishness and my Jewish body has been an issue in some relationships, but not all. My body can do some things, but not others. At times I've cursed my body for what I think it can't do. I don't always give it credit for what it can do. When I started living by myself 6 years ago now, I started baking a lot more, and with lockdowns that increased. Cakes could be easily transported and shared. Every Shabbos dinner, I take cake to my parents' place. My mum talks about how I'm good at baking like my grandmother was. I make mostly butter cakes, apple cakes, cheesecakes, lemon cakes. Simple and warming, rounded. In that last part of 2021, that same friend took me to an outdoor exercise group. Illustrate the vastly different experiences of lockdown. I don't know that it really is funny, but I know Creek during the long lockdown in 2021, shortly after my boyfriend and I had broken up, with a friend who has 3 kids, 2 cats, felt these emotions deeply. There were so many levels and layers to the strangeness of those times. My Jewishness and my Jewish body has been an issue in some relationships, but not all. My body can do some things, but not others. At times I've cursed my body for what I think it can't do. I don't always give it credit for what it can do. When I started living by myself 6 years ago now, I started baking a lot more, and with lockdowns that increased. Cakes could be easily transported and shared. Every Shabbos dinner, I take cake to my parents' place. My mum talks about how I'm good at baking like my grandmother was. I make mostly butter cakes, apple cakes, cheesecakes, lemon cakes. Simple and warming, rounded. In that last part of 2021, that same friend took me to an outdoor exercise group. I had had to break up with my therapist, who had helped me in some ways, but who had become inappropriate, and exercise would keep my brain moving. I've kept going, both in the gym, which my boyfriend introduced me to, and with the group, and I now have muscles and can do sit-ups. My body remains pleasingly soft, but has grown a firmness. But I'm resolute that this is not a Zionist strength. It's to make me more at home in my body, and with what it can do in the world and in relationships. When it winds with other bodies, it feels different now. I still have some way to go, but I am more in my body. My body is sturdy. I hope it can fight. I sat recently in a meeting with someone objectionable and pondered how in different circumstances I would fight them. Physically, I thought about punching them in the neck. But civility prevents such things happening. We have agreed on rules for what bodies can do in particular places. We agree to some of these rules without even knowing it. Such is the bodily discourse. Bodies are a relationship. They contain stories and ideas and histories, some of which we make and some of which we are made by, in a circular, never-ending movement. Sometimes it makes me weep a little, thinking about this little body of mine in space, all the conversations and moments it has been part of. That tram to work that takes me past my grandparents' places also takes me past what I've come to term Ex's Row, a short span of streets where 3 of my exes lived. Stories are overlayered. Nothing is only one thing. The roundness of life comes for us all, maybe.
So I would love to encourage you to read the full version of Jordana's essay in our 250th edition, and also to peruse the digital collections online for Overland's complete 69 years of publishing history, in which you can find Lily Brett's work and the work of many others. I just want to make a note to also acknowledge that Jordana has actually just published an incredibly exciting book, and I think by just published I mean within this month, and I am getting the title for you now. It is called Cruel Care, A History of Children at Our Borders. It's with Monash University Publishing, and it is, I think, available quite widely, so please go and purchase that book and support Jordana's work. We are really excited to have her be the first piece for this series, which also includes the work of Janine Lane, Samuel Ryan, who we'll be hearing from a little bit later, Jess Sparrow, who you'll also be hearing from very soon, and Nayu Kagori.